I think you need a product that stands alone and is a bit different. We're probably the most promo-heavy company in professional wrestling at the moment, so that's what makes us a bit different, and obviously how we execute those stories in the ring.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this, and congratulations on everything with NWA.
It's really a tribute to the NWA team and the roster that we're as far as we are. It's as I said, and I was criticized in the beginning when I bought the NWA for not spending more money. And I said, look, you can throw a lot of money at professional wrestling, but it doesn't mean it goes anywhere. So having the patience and putting together the right team behind the scenes and building a roster that you can be really proud of, that can execute my vision of what I think professional wrestling can be going into the 21st century, that takes time. And it's really starting to pay off now, and I'm really excited. But the cool thing is you can make big plans, but we're so deep in it. Like we have a pay-per-view today. It's like, then there's just the reality of running a show, and somebody misses a flight, and you're in that too. So we're somewhere in there.
I think there's still a lot of people that go, the Smashing Pumpkins guy runs a wrestling
I prefer the Rat in the Cage guy runs a
Rat in the Cage guy.
Rat in the Cage guy.
The 1979 guy?
I go with Rat in the Cage guy. That sounds a little bit more sinister.
The World is a Vampire guy?
Yeah, The World is a Vampire guy. Yeah, I did write that. It's been a very interesting journey. The simplest answer I have for the idea is that when I was a kid, there were three things I really loved: professional wrestling, music, and baseball. And my little throwaway line here is that I've been able to work in professional wrestling, obviously music, but I even had a discussion one point with the Chicago Cubs about maybe even being, part of the ownership. Obviously, I would have been very, very minority stake. But I think to tell anybody, hey, if you had three dreams when you were a kid and you could live all three dreams, I guess maybe if I was an Imagineer for Disney, that would do it all. Because so I've been very, very lucky, very fortunate to pursue the things I'm interested in. And I think what I would point to is I've worked very hard in whatever I've engaged in. So I'm not just willing to get into the dreamy part. I'm really willing to do the hard work and really learn how to be successful in those endeavors. And that's why I have so much respect for the people that have come before me in the wrestling business and the music business, because it's such a tough thing to be successful in, and particularly over the long term. I'm 30 plus years in music.
Right.
And in professional wrestling side, I guess I'm somewhere in the range of 7 to 8 years. So it's been a very interesting journey.
But I don't think people realize that you're very hands-on with this. I think when people see Billy Corgan's name attached at one point to TNA, now to NWA, they go, "Oh, he's just the money guy." But
yeah, well, you know what? Obviously that's what Dixie Carter saw me as. I mean, I thought I was being brought in to help the company, which I did. But at the end of the day, I think it's pretty easy to see that I was brought in as some sort of strange insurance policy. They could either provide cash or a chip that they could play to try to get a network deal. And that was the interest in me being part of the creative team. That's obviously water under the bridge, not that I'm bitter. But, I think, look, I don't mind, Eric Bischoff once said controversy creates cash or whatever, something like that.
Book, yeah.
It's wrestling. I don't care what people think in the sense of if it's good for the product, it's good for the business that people talk smack, totally fine with that. But at some point, I think there's a through line there that I'm a creative person, and my where I'm good at is taking a creative vision and executing it on a business level. That's a bit boring, but the fact of the matter is I've done that now for 2 businesses. And it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of faith in your vision. My vision for professional wrestling is quite different than most people's visions. Now, right now, people will point at the NWA and say, that's a bit too throwbacky for me, or I like the throwback vibe. They totally underestimate what we're going to do. This is just our entry point.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm an answer question you're not asking, but if you look, we bought a 70 now 1-ish year brand. At some point, you have to address the elephant in the room. Why would you call it the NWA or want it to be called the NWA if you're not going to try to balance this incredible history against the reality of 2020? So you have to address the history. You have to decide how your product differentiates from all the other great wrestling companies that are currently running, minus one. And no bitterness. So I think you see what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's anyway, I don't want to blab on. It's a little bit boring.
Well, do you want to be in the conversation with right now it's WWE, AEW, and then
wait, I'm going to cut you off. We are in the conversation.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm not a billionaire. We are nowhere near as funded as the other companies that are being talked about. Right. And Ring of Honor, who we enjoy a great partnership with, by the way, is owned by a $3 billion company called Sinclair. So Ring of Honor, AEW, and WWE are all owned by billionaires. So to even be in the conversation without that same level of resources, that's more a credit to our hard work and our creativity. And that's exactly the way I raised the Smashing Pumpkins through the ranks of the rock business, was we had to be a better band. We had to tell better stories, musically speaking. And that's exactly the blueprint for the NWA. It's not that big a mystery. So if you're going to try to bring a revolutionary, on some level, wrestling product to the table, well, if you make the curious decision that you're going to start with a bit of a throwback feel as far as your television product, people go, well, how is that going to revolutionize anything? You have to get people's attention first. Mm-hmm. If you don't have their attention, they're not going to listen to what you're going to say down the road. Yeah. And I'm not the biggest fan, and I've been very vocal about that, on wrestling that by and large is driven strictly with what happens in the ring. I'm a big fan, and because I grew up in the era of promos and great personalities, great guys on the mic, including managers like Bobby Heenan and, of course, Jim Cornette, that's the world that I grew up in, and I still believe in that world 100%. So I'm trying to bring that world forward into the 21st century, and I think we can do it. So if I don't believe in my heart that, let's call it, the 4-star, 5-star Meltzer match is at the foundational core of what will revolutionize the wrestling business as far as a mainstream product. Now, right now, AEW is making a very good case that I'm wrong in my assertion, but that's okay, because ultimately they will get to prove me wrong or right, and ultimately I get to prove my version wrong or right, and that's what makes it so compelling. Yeah.
So what is it that you guys are heading towards, if this is just the beginning?
I think when you look at anything that crosses over into a mainstream frame, you're looking for a balance of what makes it relevant. Okay, history in the case of the NWA is what makes us relevant, whether we can address that history and live up to it. I think you need a product that stands alone and is a bit different. We're probably the most promo-heavy company in professional wrestling at the moment, so that's what makes us a bit different, and obviously how we execute those stories in the ring. Yeah. And then I think ultimately we're going to have to get younger and faster and balance what is obviously a very important movement in wrestling to that, the 5-star Meltzer, that needs to be integrated. I was a fan of WCW in the dying days, and I remember seeing Chris Jericho and Rey Mysterio and Sugar Shane and Hoovy and these guys going out and do these amazing things. And I remember thinking, why are these guys being held back? Yeah. And here we are 20 years later, and you see, well, ultimately the fans decided that they like that more than. So you have to integrate all, basically the evolution of the business, just like I do in music, that has to be taken into account. We're not ignorant of that, but we don't think that's our foundational principle. So if we can find the balance between, let's call it that new style, which I appreciate, but I don't think is foundational to our success, what we're really good at, and I think what we're excelling at the moment, which is telling really good stories, and then tie it to the historical root of the NWA, I think that's our blueprint for success. And whether or not we can pull it off, acquire the resources, acquire the TV deals, or whatever else we need to do to prosper, that's going to be our story. And what's great about that story is it's not to the detriment of anyone else. Right. I don't think anybody else in wrestling will pursue the business the way we're pursuing the business. So we will either rise or fall on my idea, and it's not like we're against the other guy. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. And that's why I think we're very complementary to the other great promotions in the business, because we're not really their competition on that level. It's sort of like you like red, I like blue, and I think that's perfect.
What I find really interesting is, had things worked out with you in Impact Wrestling, we wouldn't even be sitting here having this conversation about NWA.
No, I'd be broke and crying.
Because you were going to buy Impact or TNA?
No, I tried to buy it, and I very forcefully tried to insert myself in the process. I had a legal right to do so, which is very complicated and boring, and probably a podcast unto itself. And the forces that were against me conspired to defraud me from those resources, and I went to court over that. The judge didn't necessarily rule against me as much as saying, I can't rule for you now, but if you want to prosecute your case. It was never resolved in that way. I obviously finger Dixie Carter in that defrauding, and I've been public about that as well.
Yeah.
What ended up happening is the case was settled, and what is now Anthem Impact, and I ended in that particular time on a handshake. That handshake is no longer valid, but the point of the matter is that it was resolved in a business frame, but it was never resolved sort of spiritually speaking, because I had every right to try to take over a company that I had invested $1.83 million in. It was all on paper.
Yeah.
And like I said, if anybody ever wanted to do a deep dive podcast on it, it's a fascinating story on why the wrestling business has been held back for so many years because of those types of insanities and egos. And basically like a lack of gravity as far as it applies to business principles.
Well, sign me up. We'll do that one next time I see you.
Right.
I'll go for as long as you want to talk about that.
We'll see how fans react to this.
Well, they're going to like this. I know
okay,
this.
Good. Okay.
Are you surprised that Impact is still somehow in business after everything?
Not at all, because really it is an incredible fan base. There's a very, very loyal fan base that's really tied to what was TNA and now Impact product, and I think the people who took it over benefited from that. Yeah, I used to say to people, I mean, if you think of the 14 or 15 years that TNA ran before it was taken over by Anthem, easily over $100 to $200 million was spent promoting that company, which is now called Impact. So it doesn't surprise me. I have my opinions on the product, but overall, I credit that more so to the great fan base.
Well, and all of that all leads to where we are right now. NWA here in Atlanta. I think when you first bought the rights for NWA and really sat back, were you planning? Because nothing really happened for the first year or two.
That's not true. But,
I guess from the outside looking in,
it felt like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it felt like that. It was a lot of strategic moves. There was a good degree of stuff behind the scenes, including talking to Impact about things we could do. We did a little bit of business with them. We worked a little bit with CZW. We worked obviously with Ring of Honor. We have a continued partnership with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And of course, we brought the title to different promotions, including Tried and True in Tennessee. So it was the question of, do we blow a bunch of money to do something if we really deep down believe it's going to go nowhere, or do we try to sort of build this piecemeal? And I think where it really started clicking was building around Nick Aldis. The great bonus in that was we discovered in the telling of the story of Tim Storm and Nick Aldis that fans really, really like Tim Storm. And Tim Storm's a huge star for us, and he's done an incredible job, and he's a total pleasure to work with behind the scenes. So we got basically in trying to build around Nick, Tim came along in that deal. And slowly but surely, we put some content out, kind of got a feel for what the audience would and wouldn't accept. And I think I guess it would have been a year and a half ago, we ran the NWA 70 show, which was headlined by Nick and Cody, and that did quite well. And we followed that with the Crockett Cup, which we did as a co-promotion with Ring of Honor. So we were able to prove that we could run a big pay-per-view event. We did good money. We did the biggest house ever in the history of the Tennessee Fairgrounds. I mean, when you think of all the promotions, including the NWA in the past, that ran in that building, we did the biggest cash gate in the history of the building. Wow. So we proved that the NWA had some staying power, and we had to clean up some contractual mess with some of the affiliates that were still remaining from the previous era. There was lots of things we had to clean up. And even there were still lingering legal issues from taking over the ownership as recently as like 3 months ago.
With you being famous in your own right, with a very popular band for many, many decades, I'm sure that the wrestling fans don't care that you have this musical career. But
most,
most,
and I'm saying this kindly, most don't, and that's fine by me. I want to be, seen in wrestling as a person in wrestling, and I don't think I should get a special.
No. But I imagine that the flip side is like, I bet your music fans are like, why are you doing this wrestling?
Oh, very
thing?
much so. Yeah, yeah. I would say 90 to 95% just scratch their heads and just think it's like my weird other thing that I do. Don't really understand it. And the only good thing that's happened, I would say, in the past year or so with the NWA is even the fans who don't get it at least have come around to understand that it is valuable, it is important, and now that they've seen it have some success, they at least look at it as like, well, he's not wasting his time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, getting this weird argument like, why don't you just work more on music? And it's like, no, it's important to do other things in life. And after 30 years, I like other challenges in my life. And actually, it's helped my musical life because it keeps me fresh when I go back. We're talking on a Friday here. I'll be back in the studio on a Monday working on new Smashing Pumpkins.
Wow.
So that's my life, and I'm cool with it.
How do you find that balance?
You don't. You don't.
Did you ever get to a point where you're like, maybe it's a bit too much wrestling right now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then do you just, I mean, how do you balance that? Do you break out a guitar and start writing music?
No. You just have to make good decisions, and you have to rely on great people like David Lagana, the vice president of NWA, to sometimes just carry the ball where you just can't, whether I'm on tour or I'm not available for 4 hours because I'm on a plane across the country. There are times where you just have to trust the people around you to execute. I wish that I could give my full time to my musical life, and I wish I could give my full time to my wrestling life, but it's just not in the cards. And so we just try to find balance. But yeah, there's no perfect balance.
Is part of your job still consuming a lot of wrestling?
I actually, believe it or not, I don't consume a lot of wrestling, and I never really did. There were times where I watched more. When I was young, I watched a lot. I watched a lot in the late 90s into the dying days of ECW. I watched for a lot then. And then probably about 5-6 years ago, I started watching again a lot, and I went out a lot to see a lot of shows because as I got back into the professional world, I kind of wanted to see where the wind was blowing. And that's sort of those times, those 3 different periods have obviously formed my idea of what can be successful going forward in wrestling.
What would you say is the biggest thing you learned from Impact Wrestling that you can now apply to NWA, good or bad?
Wait, say that one more time.
What's the biggest thing you think you learned from Impact Wrestling that can now be applied to NWA?
Well, 2 things. One is that the kind of vision I had for wrestling was only going to work with a total level of control. Navigating the political channels in a bigger wrestling company were never going to work. So, jokingly, even if Vince McMahon had called me, after I left TNA and said, kid, I want you to come up here, and I wouldn't want to work in this structure. Not to say anything disrespectful of the McMahons or how they run their business. I don't want to be a cog in a bigger wheel, because my vision sort of takes a sort of it has to be applied from the top down. Because it goes all the way through staffing and how we run. And then the other thing I would say is that, I was intimately involved and happily so with, the whole deletion angle, Broken Universe. Got to shoot a lot of great stuff with Matt and Jeff. Even shot on the Hardy's property for the one crazy segment where we were, drones. We did it all. We did it all. I can't believe the fire marshals didn't show up. Anyway, so I saw where the power of an idea can wrestling is 100+ years old.
Yeah.
And like music, a cynicism can creep in that tells you there's really nothing new. And kids and great ideas can prove over and over again, no, that's not true. You can always rewrite the rules of gravity. And so being intimately involved with the deletion angle told me that if you got a cool idea and you have great talented people like Matt and Jeff and the other people that were involved in that, Rosemary comes to mind, and Abyss and Crazy Steve, you can change the world. You can turn it upside down on its head. And if you remember during that period of time, that was the most talked about thing in professional wrestling, good and bad, as it should be. So I saw where the power of an idea can still work even in an august institution like professional wrestling. So I was able to see that at the highest levels. It's one thing to have an idea on the indies and see if it gets over with a couple hundred people somewhere. It's another thing to be on national television, enter the national or international debate. Really see, I think our ratings that week went up like 125%. I mean, it was rocket fuel for whatever we were trying to do at the moment. So, yeah, there was a real difference there.
And the fact that the show is now, NWA Powerrr is now being put on YouTube, I feel like actually gives you guys, pardon the pun, gives you a lot of power. Because people can watch it, sure, when it's streaming live, right at 6:05, and they can watch it whenever they feel like it, and they can go back through the archives.
Yeah, I think now we're starting to see binge watching, and people who didn't think it was for them are now starting to show up and then watch, the season 1 and 2. So yeah, it's exciting. I know that's something, when you're talking about after I bought the company, and then kind of this, what were you doing in the first year or so? I think what we were doing was trying to really ascertain whether a digital strategy or a digital-based strategy could work for a modern wrestling company, because in many ways we're a production house first and a live event wrestling brand second.
Yeah.
And that had never really been tried, best I could tell, outside of some MTV stuff. But it was always heavy TV production, and let's see how it goes. But our thing was, we will pivot from being a TV production first to a live touring. And people always ask, when are we going to start touring? And we're in discussions right now to start doing live touring events. So far it's working, but it took time to actually look at the numbers and see, can this work? And you get these crazy moments where something goes viral, like Dave cut a clip of Scott Steiner walking down the stairs, and the clip went viral. It's just Scott Steiner walking down the stairs.
Scott Steiner.
Yeah, but I mean, the beauty is I think that the clip of Scott Steiner, I think, did more views than the actual show itself.
Wow.
And I'm not saying one has more value, but in the cumulative era of digital media, a view is a view is a view, right?
Yep.
So we'll take it, because ultimately it will hopefully steer people back to the Powerrr product.
Do you see any parallels between what you guys are doing here in studio and Lucha Underground?
Not much.
They were in a studio. It was being kind of run by someone outside of wrestling.
Yeah, but if you remember, they had a network deal, or they had some form of a network deal. It was Mark Burnett Productions, and there was some affiliation, I believe, with AAA. So they already had an established brand company supplying a certain degree of talent. They had one of the biggest producers of television in the world, or actually the history of television,
right,
producing
Burnett,
the show, and they actually had TV deals. We are completely 100% financed by me, and it originates between our relationships with who we work with and our talent. So there are no other contrivances to surround us other than our relationships. And so I don't think there's ever been a promotion like us in the history of the business. If there is, I'd love to hear about it, because I would love to study it, because we're really trying to build a road that's not there.
Well, look, I'm so happy we were able to have this conversation.
Chris. Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you. I'm happy we were able to have this conversation now, like early on in NWA.
Now we're going to end on a teaser, right?
Okay.
You're going to cut out all of that stuff about Dixie, right?
Yeah, that's all out.
All right, I got you. You got me on that one.
Ooh, yeah,
right.
I got you.
I don't want to get sued.
You're not going to get sued.
All right, thank you, my friend.
But everyone's going to see that and go, what did they say? What was it?
That's called a wrestling. Is a teaser?
Yeah.
Taster. Good angle.
Well, there we go. Thank you for checking out the chat with Billy Corgan. And yeah, we had to edit a little bit out of that for legal reasons. But I know you're watching this because you're a big NWA fan, and what they're doing is really exciting. I love that it's not like WWE. I love that it's not like AEW. NWA looks different. It's a throwback to what the original NWA was, with a little 2020 kind of thrown in for good measure. And this is just the beginning. So I'm super excited to see what the rest of 2020 holds for NWA. And I love that Billy Corgan corrected me when I said, do you want to be in the same conversation as WWE and AEW? And he's like, no, we are in the same conversation as them. You might have seen this on my Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram, you should be following me at Chris Van Vliet. It's your chance to win these beauties right here from the incredibly talented Hal Haney. All you got to do to enter to win this is head to my Instagram at Chris Van Vliet. You'll see the photo of me holding this. Kind of looks like this. That's what the photo looks like. You got to just follow me, follow Hal Haney, and you'll be entered to win the Faces of Macho Man. Macho Madness. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, Macho Man, yeah. And let me tell you something, brother. You can win this beautiful artwork here from Hal Haney of Hulk Hogan, dude. It was okay. It was like a 7 out of 10, right? But it's your chance to win both of these bad boys. Right now, at Chris Van Vliet is where all the details are, and we're going to keep this contest open for a full 2 weeks. So if you're watching this now, as we drop this video on a Thursday, awesome. You'll be entered early to win this. But we're going to keep this going for 2 more weeks for your chance to win. All the details will be in the pinned comment there down below. So once again, thank you for watching this chat with Billy Corgan. Many more interviews, not just from NWA, but from some other different organizations coming up in the next few weeks. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss those.